I'm Amelia, 29, and I work as a graphic designer. My husband Mark and I live in a quiet suburb where the evenings smell like cut grass and the neighbors wave when you pass. Mark freelances in web development and handles projects for small businesses, which means he sets his own hours. We built a life that fits us, steady, calm, and creative. My parents, Evelyn and Richard, never liked that. They started criticizing my choices as soon as I graduated college. First, it was my job, because freelancing and contract design work didn't look as solid as a 9-to-5 office role. Then it was the house we rented, which they called too small and temporary. They always had something to pick apart, and it didn't stop when Mark proposed. When Mark and I announced our wedding plans, my parents dismissed the whole thing as a mistake. They said Mark was unreliable and hinted he wouldn't be able to provide for a family. They wanted us to postpone until we could afford a big formal ceremony. We decided on a simple backyard wedding with close friends instead. The day turned out beautiful, even though my parents kept their comments sharp and short during the reception. A year later, I found out I was pregnant. We told them over dinner at their house, hoping for at least a little excitement. Instead, Evelyn stared at me like I'd just confessed a crime. Richard asked if we had planned it. They called me too soft, too disorganized to handle a baby. Evelyn went so far as to predict I'd burn out in 6 months, and suggested that if things got hard, we could give the baby up for adoption. Mark took my hand that night as we drove home and promised that we'd raise our child with love and structure, no matter what anyone else said. He meant it, and I clung to that. Pregnancy wasn't easy. During the second trimester, I had complications that forced me to stay on bed rest for weeks. Doctor visits filled our calendar. Mark adjusted his projects so he could drive me to appointments. I kept up with my design clients from bed, sending drafts and proofs while propped up with pillows. Through all of it, my parents barely checked in. They told relatives they were letting me learn responsibility, like this was some lesson instead of their grandchild's life. Clara was born on a rainy night after a long labor. I remember the sound of the rain on the hospital windows more than anything else. She came out strong and healthy, a perfect little person who looked up at us with wide, dark eyes. Exhaustion settled into my bones, but it was the kind that feels earned. Evelyn and Richard visited the next day. Evelyn wrinkled her nose at the pale yellow nursery walls we'd chosen and said the color would warp a child's sense of calm. Richard laughed and joked about calling child services when he noticed a stack of unfolded blankets. The nurse gave him a sharp look, but he only smirked. The moment they left, Mark and I decided that visits would be scheduled and brief. Weeks passed. Friends dropped by to meet Clara and brought tiny clothes, rattles, and warm casseroles. They noticed my parents were absent from milestones like Clara's first smile and her first pediatric checkup. People asked where they were, and I didn't have a good answer beyond a shrug. As the months went on, I found a rhythm. I balanced client projects during Clara's naps, sending mock-ups to businesses that needed new logos or marketing designs. Mark picked up more freelance work too. Slowly, we began to prove every one of my parents' doubts wrong. By Clara's first spring, Mark's contracts had grown so steady that we were able to buy a modest house. No family loans, no co-signers, just our savings and the income we built together. We painted the walls soft blue and white, hung Clara's first finger paintings on the fridge, and planted a small garden out back. One night after Clara had fallen asleep, I sat on the porch with Mark and listened to the distant hum of traffic. We talked about how far we'd come from the couple my parents doubted. In that quiet moment, I made a promise to myself. I would build a home filled with warmth, patience,